In February this year, the government unveiled the Singapore Green Plan 2030. The plan is a whole-of-nation movement to advance the national agenda on sustainable development. It is led by the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of National Development, the Ministry of Sustainability and the Environment, the Ministry of Trade and Industry, and the Ministry of Transport. It will chart Singapore's green targets over the next 10 years.
Madam Chairman, climate change is the defining crisis of our time.
Mr. Teo Chee Hian is the chairman of the Interministerial Committee on Climate Change. He outlined the thinking and guiding principles behind Singapore's approach to climate change in Parliament in March.
While Singapore contributes around 0.1% of global greenhouse gas emissions, the totality of global emissions, 100%, including the other 99.9%, affects us too, and often more seriously than it affects larger, better endowed countries. So we must do our best to tackle climate change, but ultimately we depend on a collective global effort to address the issue at a global level. Singapore has been working hard to strengthen consensus and galvanize climate action regionally and globally. This has been especially critical at a time when the multilateral system is under strain from protectionism and unilateral action, further exacerbated by the challenges of COVID-19. We are also actively shaping multilateral discussions on reducing international transportation emissions. At the same time, we have been carefully planning and implementing in an integrated and coordinated long-term way the measures we need to take domestically for a low-carbon future. And our long-term,
As Mr. Teo explained, one reason for this action is that climate change poses an existential challenge for Singapore. The country's peculiar limitations mean the trade-offs it faces are much starker than what most other nations face.
First, land use. Singapore is both a city and a country. Within our small land space, we need to accommodate not just housing, parks, and commercial centers, but also power plants, reservoirs, air and seaports, and industries. The trade-offs are real, and often the choices are difficult. We cannot wish these away. For example, unlike bigger countries, we do not have large plots of land for extensive solar farms. There are many competing land users, as we have debated in this House over these last few weeks. But we do strive to maximize solar energy by aggressively deploying panels on the rooftops of suitable HDB blocks. Nationwide, we aim to deploy at least 2 gigawatt peak of solar power in Singapore by 2030, which supplies energy equivalent to the consumption of about 350,000 households for a year. We look for synergies. To supplement our limited land, we are also using our reservoirs for floating solar farms, something which several members asked about. This allows us to use our reservoirs not just for water, but also for solar power, and to provide green lungs for recreation and water activities as well. Last year, the new solar farm on Tengah Reservoir began construction, and this will be among the world's largest such facilities.
The solar farm will generate enough solar power to meet the demands of all 5 water treatment plants, making Singapore one of the few in the world to have a fully green waterworks system. Mr. Teo also reiterated the importance of securing Singapore's water and food supply.
Securing our water and food supply is a key national priority. We are making significant progress for water. So when I hear members speak about recycling, don't forget that water recycling is recycling too, and we are one of the leaders in the world in water recycling. We are making a major push for food security as well. DPM Heng announced the new Agri-Food Cluster Transformation Fund for Technology Adoption in our agri-food sector. We actively engage A-STAR and our institutes of higher learning to develop novel, resource-efficient approaches for food and water.
Mr. Teo recalled the time then Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew called for Singaporeans to create a metropolis out of mud flats. The call was to always ensure a balance between development, conservation, and the environment.
This is reflected in Singapore being among the best 20 countries in the world today in terms of emissions intensity. That is, emissions per GDP dollar. We've been able to grow our economy, create jobs, while keeping emissions per GDP dollar one of the lowest in the world. And this is in spite of all our constraints. The switch to cleaner energy will reduce demand for more carbon-intensive fossil fuels. However, demand for sustainable fuels and higher value-added petrochemical products and specialty chemicals will grow. The modern green ecosystem needs such products, such as in solar panels, batteries, thermal insulation for buildings, durable and lightweight parts for electric vehicles. And we are investing in sustainable energy too. Neste, the world's largest producer of renewable diesel and sustainable aviation fuel, is expanding its production capacity here. They are already here, and they're expanding their production. When completed, Singapore will be home to Neste's largest renewable products plant, creating new jobs. Many of the major energy and chemical companies in Singapore have also committed to reach net zero by 2050, and Singapore will partner them in this shift.
Mr. Teo reassured Singaporeans that the government will lead by example.
The public sector will lead by example by embarking on a comprehensive whole-of-government program called greengov.sg to reduce our resource footprint and carbon emissions and to enable the rest of the economy to do likewise. At the national level, our comprehensive carbon tax, which covers 80% of Singapore's carbon emissions, one of the most comprehensive coverages in the world, encapsulates these trade-offs by better aligning the real cost of carbon emissions with the emitter. As DPM said in his budget speech, the government will be reviewing the trajectory and level of the carbon tax post-2023 in consultation with industry and expert groups. We seek a carbon tax level that will incentivize companies and consumers to switch to carbon-friendly products, services, and activities while promoting industry innovation and new green growth. There are already significant new investments in sustainable industries in Singapore. I just spoke about Neste. Hyundai is constructing a research and development center and electrical vehicle pilot production facility in Singapore. These examples illustrate how Singapore can leverage and is leveraging our strengths in R&D, advanced manufacturing, and logistics to create more opportunities and good jobs for Singaporeans. In addition, we are taking steps to establish Singapore as a center for carbon credits trading and services, for sustainability consultancy, and to play a significant role in green finance for sustainable development in a growing Asia. Taking early action will often cost less in the long run than trying to raise land levels or put in protection later.
The Singapore Green Plan contains 5 pillars: city in nature, sustainable living, energy reset, green economy, and resilient future. Spearheading the first pillar is the Minister of National Development, Desmond Lee.
Asked about our plans to As an island city vulnerable to climate change, the development of climate-resilient buildings is crucial to our survival. Beyond climate adaptation, we must also reduce carbon emissions from our urban environment. And we must continue greening Singapore. Given our tight land constraints, we must find innovative ways to weave nature into our urban fabric more intensively. And even as we face developmental pressures, we must strive to protect our most ecologically important areas. We will make a big push on 3 fronts. First, transforming Singapore into a city in nature. Second, making our buildings, HDB towns and districts even more sustainable. And finally, driving research and development in urban sustainability. We are greening our urban areas more intensively. Under URA's Master Plan 2019, we will be adding another 1,000 hectares of green spaces over the next 10 to 15 years. As part of these efforts, we will add over 130 hectares of new parks over the next 6 years. At the same time, we will also enhance about 170 hectares of existing parks. These parks will feature more lush vegetation and natural landscapes. Altogether, Singaporeans can look forward to over 300 hectares of such parks by end 2026, almost 4 times the size of the Singapore Botanic Gardens. Now, as part of our plans, we are also expanding our nature park network by setting aside 50% more land for nature parks. This will provide 200 hectares of new nature parks by 2030. Singaporeans can immerse themselves in the nature park's lush forests and enjoy nature-based recreational activities. Our new nature parks also act as buffers to protect our nature reserves against urbanization and provide more habitat for native flora and fauna to thrive.
Mr. Lee stated that a key strategy of the City in Nature vision wasn't merely to conserve specific pockets of greenery and nature. It is to look at Singapore from an ecological connectivity point of view.
Habitats that are ecologically connected increase the chances of survival for flora and fauna in our city. We are doing so by studying faunal movement patterns and floral dispersal mechanisms and pathways, both on land and in water. This understanding of the connections between our natural spaces has, in turn, enabled us to conserve key habitats that are important for ecological connectivity. For example, we recognize that the forests at the future Bukit Batok Hillside Nature Park and Bukit Batok Central Nature Park are important stepping stones between the Bukit Timah Nature Reserve and the future Tengah Forest Corridor. And that is why we dedicated these nature parks as part of the Bukit Batok Nature Corridor. They will be kept lushly forested so that they can strengthen not just the area's green network, but also ecological connectivity between the nature reserve and Tengah. We also designated Sisters Island as a marine park because modeling studies indicate that it is a key source of coral larvae, which are widely dispersed and enrich other areas in the Southern Islands. And we will do more. We are developing a more comprehensive picture of our island-wide ecosystem and connectivity of green and blue spaces so that we can better consider how specific sites connect to our nature core, buffers, and corridors. And we are creating ecological corridors on the ground by doing physical planting to better connect our green spaces. For example, we are planting native trees and shrubs more intensively to recreate forest-like structures along our roads, known as nature ways, to augment our network of ecological corridors between key habitats. At the same time, we're expanding our park connector network so that we'll have 500 kilometers of park connectors by 2030. And I'm glad to share that we will develop new recreational routes across our island in the next phase of expansion of our park connector network. Together, these moves will not only strengthen ecological connectivity, but also provide Singaporeans with greater access to green spaces close to home. By 2030, every household will be within a 10-meter walk from a park. Our urban areas will also be naturalized and greened even further. By incorporating natural designs and plantings into our parks and streetscapes, they can serve as nature-based solutions to help provide shade, cool the environment, improve air quality, enhance flood resilience, and beautify our city. We are conserving our rich biodiversity through through habitat restoration and species recovery programs. For example, as part of our Marine Conservation Action Plan, we placed purpose-built intertidal pools along a barren stretch of seawall to provide a habitat during low tide for coastal and marine biodiversity to thrive. We are also working with the community to improve how we coexist with nature and wildlife by taking a science-based approach towards wildlife management and harnessing both ecological and social tools to minimize human-wildlife conflict. The active support of the community is crucial to making our city in nature vision a reality.
Mr. Lee also spoke on the 1 million trees movement, planting 1 million trees across Singapore in the next decade. He said it is one way to underpin the city in nature effort.
The 1 million trees movement is not merely a quantitative effort to increase our island's tree numbers or to engage in ornamental planting. Instead, it underpins our qualitative transformation into a city in nature. Not just nature, but a city as well. Indeed, even if we were to hypothetically forego all our needs and halt all new development on vegetated land, we would still need to plant more trees at an accelerated rate in light of our climate challenges. The trees we are planting offer us many benefits. I mentioned some of them just now. Mitigating urban heat to increase our climate resilience, providing more habitat for local biodiversity in our existing green spaces, and strengthening our ecosystem's resilience by creating ecological corridors. Indeed, even in the heart of our core forests, we are doing tree planting and forest restoration as part of our 1 million trees movement. At the same time, we are also proactively removing invasive species like albizia trees, Dioscorea, and oil palms to allow our native rainforests to regenerate. This is because we need to actively manage our forests to make them stronger. By doing so, we are assisting our early secondary forests to transition into more mature and diverse rainforests over time, and improving habitats for native biodiversity. These efforts strengthen the resilience of our forest landscapes to climate change. This is painstaking, long-term work, and we are deeply appreciative of our community of volunteers who have rolled up their sleeves and have been working alongside us to make our native ecosystems healthier and more resilient. NParks will continue to study and model our biodiversity's movement patterns to inform our understanding of ecological connectivity across Singapore and how to strengthen it. So studying ecological connectivity in a city, in an urban environment, to infuse city nature all through our urban landscape. Given Singapore's land constraints, we will not be able to keep every vacant land undeveloped. As a city-state, we must cater for everything that a country needs within just our city limits. We need space to continue meeting our people's needs, ranging from industry and food production to more public housing for Singapore families. However, we adopt a range of strategies to make good use of existing land as good stewards ought, and in so doing, enable us to retain more green spaces of significant biodiversity. We are also committed to engaging stakeholders, including members of the public and the nature community, further upstream in our planning process, and will work with them at suitable platforms to identify these areas of interest.
Conserving resources must become a way of life was the main message from Minister of Education Lawrence Wong. He reiterated that Singaporeans needed to consume less, recycle more, and take public transport. His speech highlighted how sustainability education will be strengthened to nurture future generations to be more environmentally conscious.
Environmental education is not new in our schools. It is part of the curriculum, and many schools have programs to help our students learn to be more environmentally conscious. We will build on this foundation and take it further. In particular, we will strengthen and deepen the current strands of environmental education in schools and weave these together to create an eco-stewardship program in all our schools, from primary to pre-university. The term stewardship represents our individual and collective responsibility to take good care of the environment, not just in the short term, but always with an eye for the future and for future generations. Doing so requires responsible and informed decision-making and choosing to do what is good and right through our daily habits. It also entails an innovative spirit and a mindset of growth where we can pioneer new ways of doing things in caring for the environment. So through this eco-stewardship program, we aim to inculcate informed and responsible sustainability habits in our students for life. We aim to empower them to make a positive difference in their schools, in their homes, and in the community.
Under the Eco Stewardship Program, environmental sustainability will be integrated into schools through the 4 C's: curriculum, campus, culture, and community. Mr. Wong said that under curriculum, environment and climate change education will be further enhanced in the sciences and humanities.
To make the learning come alive, we will develop more learning resources which feature sustainability initiatives within our school environment. These learning resources will help students to connect their learning to their actual lived experience in schools and make the learning more authentic and engaging.
The second C, campus, where the infrastructure of schools will be progressively enhanced with a range of green features.
We now have about 130 schools on the Solar Nova program, with solar panels being progressively installed on their rooftops. We will extend this to cover most of our remaining schools in the coming decade. We will improve energy efficiency of all our school campuses. We will embark on a program to gradually have LED lights as the main light source in our classrooms and more energy efficient direct current fans. Some schools have already actively harnessed sustainability features within their campuses to enrich students' learning. For example, I visited Commonwealth Secondary School recently. They have several eco-habitats, including the rainforest, the stream, and the wetland. These outdoor classrooms provide students with real ecosystems that they can study and observe. The students also plant their own vegetables in the school's nursery, which are harvested for the canteen's use. So through this immersive environment, students develop a better appreciation for nature and biodiversity. MOE will therefore continue to green our schools and test-bed new innovations so that our school buildings can be more sustainable and our school campuses can become learning laboratories for our students to see sustainability in practice.
The third C is culture. Beyond academic learning and infrastructure, students need right sustainability habits.
We will build on existing efforts to instill daily habits of environmental consciousness. We will expand our everyday responsibilities to include sustainability habits. It could be simple activities like switching off lights and fans upon leaving the classrooms. And in fact, some schools have also encouraged students to reduce and recycle food waste. For example, Elias Park Primary School has a food waste management program where students are taught and encouraged to order only what they can finish and use the biodigesters in the canteen for food waste recycling. We will expand such good practices into more schools and pilot ways for students to see that their daily habits can make a discernible impact on the environment. We will also help students champion sustainability mindset and practices through leadership opportunities so that they can encourage their peers and friends towards more sustainable living.
Community is the fourth C. Mr. Wong believes that the learning from schools will encourage and cultivate more good habits to create a ripple effect on society.
We will widen and enhance the platforms for students to participate in meaningful community projects to care for the environment and to promote sustainable living. MOE will also work with partners to strengthen students' awareness of future green jobs. So we are equipping our teachers and school education and career guidance counselors to build students' awareness of these future opportunities and to help them discover and explore their interests. These opportunities to explore and prepare our students for more careers in the environmental and sustainability sector will continue beyond schools to our institutes of higher learning, or IHLs. Our IHLs will connect students with relevant industry partners through career fairs and the support of education and career guidance counselors. They will also work with industry partners to curate internships to expose students to jobs in these sectors. Beyond a greater push for our youth to consider a career in these sectors, the IHLs themselves are also enhancing the green infrastructure and promoting sustainable living initiatives within their own campuses. For example, NUS has developed a Climate Action Plan 2030 to cool its campus by 4 degrees Celsius and to build a carbon-neutral campus. Other universities too are embarking on their own sustainability journeys. To further complement these education efforts at the school and IHL level, we will also leverage on the new Science Centre at Jurong Lake District. The Science Centre will champion public education on sustainability. It will serve as a showcase for innovative technologies through programs and exhibits to engage youths and the public. And with all this, we hope it will also inspire sustainable lifestyle changes among Singaporeans and in our society.
Mr. Wong also stated that MOE aims to achieve a 2/3 reduction of net carbon emissions from the school sector by 2030. MOE will work towards achieving at least 20% of all schools to be carbon neutral by 2030, with the rest to follow thereafter.
We will start by piloting sustainability features and related concepts in some schools. We have identified as a start 4 schools to be on board, and they are Elias Park Primary School, Mito School, Commonwealth Secondary School, and Tampines Secondary School. These schools have already adopted a holistic school-wide approach to sustainability. So we will work with them to further reduce net carbon emissions from the school buildings and to encourage students to actively reduce their individual carbon footprint. We will learn from the experiences in the pilot and progressively scale up good and practical solutions across all our schools. We have set ambitious plans for ourselves. They are not just hard targets in reducing carbon emissions, but equally, if not more importantly, they are about nurturing our young with the values, skills, and know-how to become responsible stewards of the environment. We hope to see in every student an eco-steward for life, where they will have a sensible sensitivity towards the environment and understand what it means to live sustainably. Through our concerted efforts, we can seed and grow a sustainability movement where we can create a greener future for our children to harvest. Then they can look forward with confidence to a better and brighter future for their own children and for many more generations to come in Singapore.
The Minister for Transport, Ong Ye Kung, focused his third pillar energy reset speech on electric vehicles, or EVs. He said that as most of the power here is generated by natural gas, the net carbon savings by switching from traditional vehicles or ICEs to EVs is about 50%.
Vehicles on the whole emit about 6.4 million tons of CO2 equivalent per year. And if a subset of light vehicles all ran on electricity, the total net carbon abatement would be about 1.5 to 2 million tons per year of CO2 equivalent per year. So this abatement is about 4% of our total annual emissions. So not insignificant. Hence, the Green Plan includes a push for EVs. We have a 2040 target to phase out ICEs and have all vehicles run on cleaner energy. And to realize this vision, and given that COEs for cars last for 10 years, we will require from 2030 all new car and taxi registrations to be of cleaner energy models. So they can be electric, they can be hybrid, hydrogen fuel cell cars, etc. So as these technologies are evolving rapidly, we will monitor developments closely and finalize the definition of registrable models well before 2030. To further pave the way for greener vehicles, we will also cease new diesel car and taxi registrations from 2025.
Mr. Ong noted that technological advancement is rapidly narrowing the price difference between ICEs and EVs.
Experts think price equalization will happen in 2025 or earlier. To give members an illustration, in 2010, the main cost of an EV is in the battery. In 2010, the cost is about US $1,000 per kilowatt of battery power. By now, it is about $140. So fall from, in 10 years, $1,000 per kilowatt hour to about $140. And experts feel that when it reaches about $100 per kilowatt hour, that is the tipping point when there will be price equalization between EVs and ICEs. But in the meantime, while the prices are falling, we will offer tax incentives to EV owners. We introduced the EV Early Adoption Incentive this year, and together with the Enhanced Vehicular Emission Scheme, the cost of owning an electric car can be lowered by up to $45,000. Since the start of the year, there have been about 100 new electric car registrations. Small number, but we will ramp it up. Many mass market electric car buyers still cannot benefit from the full $45,000 rebate because there's a minimum payment of $5,000 for the ARF. So to enable mass market electric cars to benefit from the full rebate, we will remove the $5,000 minimum ARF.
Mr. Ong showed examples of different kinds of plugs for EVs that are used around the world.
And we have settled on two of these plugs, the one that is with a red border around it. So it's Type 2 for AC charging and CCS2 for DC charging. And these are the most widely adopted now internationally. And we'll adopt these as our national public charging standards. The set of technical standards and safety precautions that govern EV charging systems in Singapore is called the TR25, Technical Regulations 25. It is administered by the EMA, or Energy Market Authority. To give dedicated focus to this work, we will amend legislation to transfer the role of regulator of EV charging systems from EMA to LTA. LTA is also leading a comprehensive review of TR25 in partnership with industry players and various stakeholders and experts. We expect the review to be completed by end of this year. The idea is to make TR25 friendly to industry development while ensuring safety. While the review is ongoing, LTA plans to set up regulatory sandboxes for commercial players to test and introduce new charging solutions. It is very important that we get this right because it will determine the level of private sector involvement in finding solutions to build up the infrastructure and drive EV charging and adoption.
Mr. Ong spoke of expanding the EV charging network. The plan was to increase them from 20,000 to 60,000 by 2030.
This comprises 40,000 in public car parks and 20,000 in private premises. If we assume 1/3 of our cars are EVs by 2030, this translates to a EV to charging point ratio of 5:1. 5:1. And this ratio is better than many public estimates of the optimum ratio, which ranges from 10:1 to 5:1. We're aiming for 5:1 by 2030. The key to unlocking more charging facilities is not to insist on high-powered or fast charging, because that would require a major upgrading of almost all the power substations and the grid infrastructure all over Singapore. It would be costly, time-consuming, stall the development and expansion of charging infrastructure, and severely impede the adoption of EVs. And finalize the
Mr. Ong called on drivers to change their habits regarding charging their EVs.
We can move much faster in making charging points available if we accept that for most users, instead of high-powered fast charging, slow or overnight charging is actually all right. And so a mindset shift is required. But after all, we are used to patiently charging all our electronic devices, whether they are smartphones, smartwatches, or laptops, while we sleep or while we are in office doing work. It will be the same for EVs. For this mindset shift to happen, we will need to make chargers available and accessible. The average electric car now, it has a range of 400 to 500 kilometers typically, but it is increasing. That should require a typical user to fully charge about once every 5 days. Not every day, once every 5 days. And so charging points will need to be shared, with different drivers charging on different days and at different times, especially in public car parks.
Mr. Ong moved on to discuss the locations for the charging points in both public and private spaces.
As for existing car parks, if they are in public housing estates, public sector agencies such as HDB or URA will drive the installation. We will implement these in phased packages, well spread across the island, and we will take a town-centric approach. We aim to have at least 7 EV-ready towns by 2025. By the 2030s, we will strive to make every HDB town an EV-ready town. For non-landed private residences, such as condominiums, in fact, mainly condominiums, we will introduce an EV common charger grant to catalyze implementation. This is part of the 30 million allocation announced in the budget to kickstart the build-up of the EV charging infrastructure. Condos will be able to apply for the grant to defray part of the cost of installing a charger, subject to a quantum cap per charging point. This will be made available to the first 2,000 chargers installed from July 2021.
Residential and industrial areas will also see changes under this third pillar of energy reset. Minister of National Development Desmond Lee spelled out some of these in his speech.
Buildings account for over 20% of our emissions, so we need to push hard to make our city more sustainable. To achieve this, we will use cleaner energy and increase our energy efficiency. Over the past year, BCA and the Singapore Green Building Council have worked together to develop the next edition of the Singapore Green Building Master Plan, together with industry stakeholders and the community. The master plan captures our collective commitment to pursue more ambitious sustainability standards in our city. We have set ourselves 3 targets, and I call them 80, 80, 80 in 2030. First, we will green 80% of our buildings by gross floor area by 2030. This is an existing target to ensure that the majority of buildings that we use in our everyday lives will be sustainable and energy efficient. To date, we've made good progress by greening over 43% of our buildings, but we have more to do. Our second target is for 80% of new buildings to be super low energy buildings from 2030. The government will take the lead in super low energy buildings. In so doing, we will build industry capability to develop super low energy buildings and provide more use cases for the private sector to take reference from. Our third target is for our best-in-class green buildings to see an 80% improvement in energy efficiency compared to 05 levels by 2030, so pushing the boundary further.
He noted that HDB is also incorporating technology into the design of towns to improve ventilation and reduce heat gain.
Within their homes, residents will be able to use technology and apps to monitor and optimize the use of their home appliances and equipment, enabling them to conserve electricity, save money, and participate in our sustainability efforts too.
These sustainability efforts include using smart LED lights to reduce energy use, doubling total solar capacity on HDB rooftops, and converting the top decks of suitable multi-story car parks into urban farms, community gardens, and green landscapes.
So far, HDB has called or awarded tenders to implement solar panels on more than 5,700 HDB blocks. Installation of these solar panels is in progress and will be completed in the next 2 to 3 years, achieving more than 50% of our 2030 solar capacity target of 540 megawatt peak. HDB and SFA have also awarded tenders for urban farming at 9 multi-story car parks and will be working closely to do more. In addition, residents or organizations with interesting ideas to promote sustainability can tap on MSC's Eco Fund for their initiatives. And if these prove workable, MND and MSC will work together to see if these can be scaled to more HDB estates under the Green Towns program.
He drew an analogy between sustainability and running a marathon.
We cannot run alone, and we must be in it for the long haul. To be responsible stewards not just for our children, but for their children after them. In that spirit, let us come together to push ahead in the next bound of our sustainability journey, to make the Green Plan a reality, and to build a Singapore that we can be even prouder of.
In our next program, we will look at the final 2 pillars of the Singapore Green Plan 2030, the green economy and building a resilient future.